All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest live stream from Esri developers. We're super excited today to be chatting about the ArcGIS Maps SDK for Flutter, which is the latest to join our native Maps SDK family. And today we have myself and Paul from the Flutter team, and also Rex joining us from product management. So hopefully between us, we can share some interesting chat about the Flutter SDK, what to expect now and in the future, and share a few demos, and of course also hopefully answer any questions that you might have. So yeah, we can see people joining on now. So yeah, hello to everyone. Welcome to those continuing to join, and also to those listening back in the future. And we'll just go ahead and introduce ourselves initially. So my name is Jen Merritt, and I'm a product engineer with our Flutter SDK. And I've been working at Esri for about 4 years now, and started out following the graduate or the associate program here at Esri, working with the Maps SDK for Java initially, and then started with the Flutter team about a year ago. So Paul, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, yep. My name is Paul Sturm. I've been with Esri for going on 2 years now, and I originally started with the Qt SDK team, and just a few months after I started, I got wind of this opportunity to join the Flutter team, so I moved over to the Flutter team, and I've been doing that for a year and 9 months now. Yep, and that's it for me. Over to, how about you, Rex?
Cool. Thanks, Paul. Rex Hansen. I'm a product manager for our native Maps SDKs. I've been with Esri for a little over 27 years. I've seen a lot of technology. This is some of the most exciting technology to come out of Esri with our native and also our game engine SDKs. So great to see some of this new work that's going on to support our Flutter developer community out there as well. So excited to see what we have in store for you guys today, and I'll hand it back to Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Rex. Yeah, so that's ourselves, and yeah, we also want to know a little bit about you guys. So we're going to drop a poll into the chat here, and yeah, let us know if you've used Flutter before. So, are you an existing Flutter developer? Have you tried it before? Are you an expert? Let us know. It'd be great to know where you sit with your experience with Flutter. And we were chatting a little bit earlier about how we can bring Flutter into our introductions, and kind of the classic interesting fact that these live streams have brought. So I'm going to share my screen now and show you one of our sample applications. And Paul and I were talking about interesting things we can see on aerial photography near where we live. So I'm going to jump to a bookmark that I've created here for myself. So I'm based in the UK, and near where I live, there's this chalk horse on a hill. So there you go. That's pretty neat on aerial photography here. And if I jump to Paul's bookmark, talk us through, Paul. Talk us through what we see.
Here's my backyard. They used to say that you could see the Great Wall of China from space, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then when I built my fire pit in my backyard, I realized you could also see my fire pit from space.
Nice.
Just like the Great Wall of China.
This is right here, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
I just
Brilliant.
I just need to know the schedule the next time they're going to send the satellite over, so I can have it lit up real good when they take the picture. I'm not sure to talk to about that though.
Nice. Okay, so there you go. That's our introductions and our interesting aerial photography for today. But moving on from introductions, we firstly want to just really have a little bit of a chat and discussion about the project history and kind of how we've ended up where we are today. So we'll sort of walk through a little timeline. So I think maybe the best thing at the start, Paul, if you kind of talk about your experiences and your entry into the Flutterverse.
So, yeah. So like it was at Dev Summit 2 years ago. This two, little under 2 years ago, and there was a user presentation from the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they said that they had built an ArcGIS application using Flutter, and that surprised me because we don't have a Flutter SDK, and also it surprised me because I've never heard of Flutter before. So when I saw that session on the schedule, I thought to myself, how did they pull that off? How did they build Maps SDK uh, with Flutter? So that was the first time I knew anything about Flutter was when one of our user presentations came in and said that they built their app with Flutter and our SDK, and they answered my question. How did they pull it off? They pulled it off because they took our two of our existing SDKs. It was at the time was the Objective C SDK on the iOS platform and the Java SDK on the Android platform, and they had created a Flutter wrapper around both of them to give them a shared common Flutter API, and then they built against that Flutter API. So my thought there was, well, that's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome that they were able to do that. But it got me thinking, could we do that better? Could we do that with fewer moving pieces and do it more directly using Flutter? And so that got me thinking, and that got me reading through the flutter.dev website, just churning through all of the documentation, wondering, can we do this ourselves? So that was my first introduction to Flutter, watching the Fish Washington app at Dev Summit. And how about you, Jen? What was your intro into Flutter?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of real intro, I think the same at the Dev Summit, attending that same session you talk about. But I had been aware of Flutter and I'd done a few online tutorials and just generally thought this is quite nice to use. And like you mentioned, I kind of love the whole SDK around it, the widget based UI, and the quality of the documentation. And so that's partly what made that presentation stand out to me in the agenda. And so I attended that as well. And obviously showed an interest to kind of join the team. And yeah, I was aware there'd been sort of technical limitations as to why we hadn't necessarily pursued that before now. And I know there's also product limitations, which we'll come to in a sec. But what about some of the kind of technical feasibility of getting it off the ground, Paul? What kind of stuff did you then look into?
Right. So after we got back from Dev Summit, I talked to my boss about, should we examine this? Could we think about fielding a Maps SDK for Flutter? And so we lined up what we call the research spike, which is just a time boxed period to see if we could actually, as a matter of technical feasibility, could we actually make this work? And so we looked around the Dart and the Flutter tech stack to see if we could possibly create a Maps SDK out of it. And there was basically two fundamental building blocks that we would need in order to make it work. And the one was we needed a way to call from Dart code into our ArcGIS code, and our ArcGIS functionality. It's all written in C++, and it has a thin layer of C interoperability on top of that. So we needed to figure out, is there a way to call from Dart into the C API? And then the second big hurdle we needed to cross was, is there a way for us to have a drawing surface that we can draw into and have that drawing surface live within the Flutter world, the Flutter stack, like so that it can exist alongside buttons and other controls, and that you can draw controls on top of the map. And for that, we needed this feature of Flutter called Platform View, and Platform View is a class in the Flutter framework that allows you to embed a native view into the Flutter widget hierarchy. And in the Flutter world, the platform view is advancing as we go. And at the time and currently, it's supported on iOS and Android. And so between having the Dart interoperability into C and having a drawing surface for Android and iOS, we were able to determine that we could, in fact, field a Maps SDK for Flutter, but it would be limited to Android and iOS, at least until Flutter advances their support for other platforms. So that's where we started. We started with iOS and drawing, and moved quickly to Android. And since then, we've been, building the technical infrastructure.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that's kind of the technical side of, why we support iOS and Android initially, and also what kind of got us off the ground. But I guess, Rex, there's obviously Esri were aware of Flutter. It's not like it's just appeared on the horizon for Esri, and indeed many other potential technologies and platforms, but there's always new stuff coming. So I wonder if you can give a bit of context to the challenges of us getting to this point of actually moving forward with a product.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So we're always on the product side. We're always looking for opportunities for technologies that we can build on, that developers within our community can build out great mapping experiences across multiple devices, multiple platforms. And so there are a number of different cross-platform technologies that have been available and have come and gone through the years. And we saw Flutter, emerge from Google, I think back in 2017. And we initially started to get some feedback from our developer community about some of the benefits of working with Flutter, some of the rapid development experiences there, very lightweight, minimal code, maximum value, targeting iOS and Android or mobile platforms. So we first started getting some of those requests back in 2019, and then we continue to see that those requests grow, and really that sort of almost like an avalanche of need and requests for taking advantage of this developer technology that Google promotes and Google supports. And we like to see, of course, Google promote this as a rapid a mechanism for rapid application development. Of course, on the native SDK side, we try and keep an eye on what's happening and very nimble to be able to support our developer community. And so we're always reassessing what's available and what we can build. And so obviously seeing some of the interest in Flutter reach kind of a critical mass last year. Paul talked about some of the research spike and trying to figure out if this is something we can build on our current architecture. One of the reasons why we have a common architecture founded in C++ is so that we have a consistent experience across all of our SDKs, so we can meet the developers where they are, and they can expect a consistent experience regardless of which managed API or which managed SDK they use, whether they're targeting iOS or Android or Windows or Linux or Mac. Regardless, if the developer experience, the developer platform that we're supporting supports the operating system that we support as part of our core, we can look at building out a managed experience there for developers to take advantage of it. But we need to make sure as an organization that when we build that support, we build it in a consistent way so that we eventually meet basically some of common functionality requirements across all of our SDKs eventually, and that the common experience is available regardless of which managed API you choose. So at the same time, we need to be able to support the products responsibly. And that means they need to adhere to our current life cycle, which at this stage, the standard is 4 years. And so it's not we build it, we deliver it, and then, hey, good luck. No, we own it, we support it, and we continue to build on it going forward, as long as it's a viable, developer technology and developer platform. Again, depending on the platform itself and the vendor that delivers that platform and opportunities in that space. So all of that together means that we want to be able to take this common core of functionality that we currently make available within our native SDKs, and really start to build out a Flutter SDK on top of that, and introduce the rich and deep set of functionality to Flutter developers. They can target iOS and Android in a cross-platform technology with the sort of minimalistic approach to writing code and sort of maximum value. And also some of the tools that we'll see about how you can rapidly develop your applications. And so we were excited to see all that come together, and we needed to make sure that on the product side that there was commitment on the vendor side. We needed to make sure that we had the team and the staff and the customer base, of course. Once we knew we had a significant customer need to be able to introduce the Flutter SDK, and so we've embarked on that process here with our initial release of beta this year, which is great to see. So a lot of thought goes into this, and we're always kind of keeping an eye on what the developer technologies are in the developer community for building native applications. And Flutter has been really a great and advancing platform for mobile application development. They might graduate into in a way that we can maybe transition into maybe more desktop or Windows-based development. We'll see. But right now, for sure, mobile application development for iOS and Android is a definitive opportunity for us to be able to provide these mapping components, and for our customers to be able to build out mapping applications. So excited to get the Flutter Maps SDK started, and see it through to production. So
yeah, definitely, yeah. And but for anyone who doesn't know, we released our first beta in April, after announcing it at the European Developer Summit in Berlin in November. And we've had some great feedback and interactions in the forum for the early adopter platform. And we kind of taken that into our beta 2 release, which is coming out in the next couple of weeks. So definitely look out for that if you haven't tried it already. And even if you have, we're going to have some new functionality in there, including OAuth authentication for you to authenticate with services. And we've also done some improvements under the hood as well with memory and performance. And then on top of that, we've added and fixed a load of features that have come from you, our developers, from the first release. So we've added some map view interaction options, so you can sort of turn off rotation, for example. We've got hot restart working reliably, which is one of those development tools that Flutter provides that really complements the hot reload functionality. And then on top of that, we're also going to be supporting Windows as a development host, which again was something requested by our beta users. And so, we really wanted to get that in for our beta 2 release. So definitely, look out for that in the next couple of weeks. And I will just check if we have any questions. I can see people joining. So hi everyone. And definitely fill out our poll if you haven't already. So I think probably at this point, let's jump into a demo. It'd be good to see some code. So Paul, do you want to take it away and introduce us to Flutter?
Okay, so all right, so I'm going to share my screen, and here is perhaps your first look at ArcGIS Maps in Flutter. And there's probably two audiences here that we're talking to. One is ArcGIS developers who are new to Flutter and who are interested in Flutter, and then Flutter developers who are interested in ArcGIS and in integrating Esri's technologies into their existing apps. So just as a matter of introduction, to introduce the basics, I wanted to talk a little bit about working with Flutter and working with the Maps SDK inside Flutter. So if you're So this should be pretty basic if you've used Flutter before, but if you haven't used Flutter, I just wanted to describe it a little bit. So Flutter is the UI framework and is written in the language Dart. So sometimes we use Flutter and Dart interchangeably, but the basic idea is Flutter is the UI framework and Dart is the language. And when you're working with the Flutter framework, the mental model is that your code is in conversation with the Flutter framework. And the Flutter framework asks you, given the current state of your app, what should your user interface look like? And then you respond back to Flutter in this build method, and you respond back with a description of your user interface. And the description of your user interface takes the form of a tree of widgets. So it's a widget at the top, and then child widgets in a tree below it. And so any Flutter program is going to have this build method, and they're going to all have a tree of widgets. And so like each of these are widgets. Scaffold is a widget. Stack is a widget. Safe area is a widget. And in Flutter, you generally see composition of many widgets where each widget has very narrow responsibilities. So a stack is just a way to have widgets that stack on top of each other, like in a Z order. And then a text widget is a widget that presents a bit of text, and so on and so forth. And like a container is just intended as a container of some other widget. So in your build method, you return a widget tree that represents what your UI should look like given the current state. And so like here, we're looking at a sample called Identify Layer Features. And I have it running over here in an iOS simulator and an Android emulator. And of course, this could also run on a hardware device if you have one, but this is just easier to demo. And so you see a map, and you see two feature layers. One layer represented by the blue dots, that's cities of the world, and then the other features are going to be this is a layer that represents damage to buildings. So like if you were a insurance adjuster, you might want to keep a record or view a record of damaged buildings in an area. So that's just two kinds of information you can display in layers on a map. So that's just a quick example of what this sample is. And the way that the Maps SDK works its way into your widget tree is through this widget called ArcGIS Map View. And this is our widget that we create and we present to you. And then you can integrate it into your user interface however you like. Here I'm showing it pretty much full screen, top to bottom, with a text on top of it, and scaffold with a back button up here. So we present to you this map view, and then the next most important thing is you have to have a controller, and this is another class, and this is the class you use to interact with the map. So you can set layers, set the viewpoint, do whatever you need with the map. You work through the controller to take those actions. And then as part of this widget, we give you callbacks. The one is on map view ready, one is on tap, and this is how you hook in to your code. So when the map is ready, or when the map view is ready, you'll get this callback on map view ready, and you can take action at that point. And then whenever a tap happens, you can set a callback and you can receive information about the tap that happened. So if we go look at on map view ready, what we decided to do for this app, this particular sample, is we're going to load up the service feature table and an image layer, and we're going to create the map. We're going to give it a particular base map and a particular viewpoint, and then we set the map to the controller, and then from there, the engine takes it away and loads the map, loads the layers, and presents them to you in the map view. And then this next part ties more into the Flutter framework. Here we're using set state, which is a method provided by the Flutter framework, and we're setting some state values. We're setting message, which is a string of text, and we're setting this Boolean to true. But let's just look at this message. So as part of the conversation between you and Flutter asks you, what should the user interface look like given the current state? And then the other half of that conversation is you tell Flutter when the state has changed. So in this case, the message, we want that to change. So we change the message, and then we call set state, and that tells Flutter, the Flutter framework, something about this widget has changed, and here's what it is. And then Flutter understands that the state has changed, and so it decides, I need to ask you again, what does your user interface look like? And it does that by calling the build method again and asking the same question. It says, given the current state of your application, what should the user interface look like? So the first time through, the message was blank. Then now the second time through, the message has some value. So down here in our text widget, we're displaying that message. And then that appears. So Flutter understands that you want to display that message in the text, and so that appears in the user interface. And when you're working with the Flutter framework, it's important not to try to subvert that conversation. It's important that you keep in mind that Flutter will ask you what your user interface is, according to the given state. You don't have to modify the user interface. You don't actually have to modify any of these widgets. You just tell Flutter the state is changed, and then Flutter asks you, what should the user interface be now? So you just work within that paradigm of setting the state and then building your user interface. All right, so now we get to something interesting. We have a map, we have some layers, and then now I'm going to tap on the map somewhere. I'm going to tap right here, and then it tells me that there was one blue dot representing a city, and then there were 7 buildings damage reports. And if you zoom in far enough, you can see that there are 7 independent damage reports. So in the code, what that looks like is we've set up this on tap method. And so whenever a tap happens, you'll get this callback, and it'll tell you the local position of the tap in the Flutter screen coordinates. And then you can do whatever you want with that. And one common thing you'll want to do with that is to use the identify API. And so here we're going to use identify layers. And we set some parameters. We give it that position that they tapped, and then we get back the results from that layer. And then in this particular case, we're just counting. We're just totaling up the number of items that were found. but in a more realistic application at this point, you would maybe present the information in your user interface somehow. And then after having calculated whatever we're going to use, we then see the set state again. And in this case, we're changing the message again. So we set the message, the Flutter framework calls us back in with the build method, and we say the new text to display here is this, damaged residential buildings, with however many were found at that tap location. So that's kind of the basic framework. And then we do always want to show off the hot reload. So hot reload is a feature provided by Flutter, and it allows you to modify your user interface, modify your code as you go. And instead of having to recompile and redeploy your code changes, it sends the changes over live to you. So we can just look at that quick. So here we are, we're looking at this text message. And is there a left? Yeah, there's a left. So now I haven't hit save, but when I hit save, it'll immediately be reflected. Well, okay, no, that's not a good example. Yeah. So let's change the color to red. And then when we hit save, it immediately gets reflected on both the iOS and the Android app. And yeah, I should have tried this beforehand, but yeah, so the text alignment isn't going to matter because the text field is only that wide. But you can add, I'm just doing this live, you can add whatever you want. And when you hit save, it immediately appears in your user interface with the live application. And it's not any sort of preview, it's just the live application. So I'll put it back to white just so it's readable again. All right, so in kind of summary, overall, when you're using Flutter with the ArcGIS Maps SDK, you're going to add a map view to your widget hierarchy, and then you're going to use taps or other user interface actions like buttons, and then you're going to operate on the controller to adjust what you see, layers, viewpoint, anything else that you can do with a map. You'll work through the API presented to you by the controller. Right, so that'll be the basic experience of working with the Maps SDK for Flutter. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, head back to Jen.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, no, that's a really good demo showing a load of features of our API and what's available to you at this point in time, and then also some of the Flutter tools there, like Hot Reload as well, which you can use alongside our API. So now that you've seen the kind of demo, and you've heard a little bit of background, I'm sure you're wondering, how do I actually get involved, and what resources are available? So I'll just walk you through some of those, and we're just going to double check while we're doing that the questions. I think hopefully the question about working on Windows, that is going to be possible as a development host for the beta 2 release. So in a couple of weeks' time, you can use Windows as your development host, as a couple of others have contributed. Obviously, that would be for Android development. So for the true cross-platform and being able to actually work on your iOS applications, that would require Mac. And also I can see Rex has jumped in on the question about ultimately, yeah, we hope to support the same functionality as your SDKs. And we'll come to that in a second with our plans for the next coming months. So I will just share now and just walk you through some of the resources that you can go away and take a look at following today. So as mentioned, we're currently in beta with a beta 2 coming out in a couple of weeks' time. So to get access to that, you go to our early adopter portal, and there's a link to this in the video description. So you can grab that, sign up, and you will get access to this portal, which provides a range of getting started documentation and videos, whether you're new to trying Flutter, so from getting set up with Flutter, we recommend using VS Code, for example, and then also how you get started with our API. So we provide a samples repository, which is available on GitHub. Again, there's a link in the video that you can follow just below. And you can effectively run a whole range of different applications that cover the functionality we've got available at this point in time. And we'll keep adding samples as we add functionality. So for example, you can display feature layers from different sources, whether it's a portal or a geodatabase or a geopackage. While we don't necessarily have API for all layer types at the moment, you can bring in your web maps with whatever layer types you have. We also have support for offline workflows. So for example, using our ahead of time workflows. So if you've configured your offline areas in your web map, you can bring those into your Flutter applications and view your maps offline. And then we also have sort of routing and geocoding support. So you can solve routes and perform geocoding and search as well. So right now we're supporting 2D workflows primarily, and hopefully in the future, we'll bring in support for 3D and everything else that the other SDK support, as we've mentioned. So we also provide an API reference where you can see all the classes that are available at this point in time. So for example, we can go into the ArcGIS Map class, and you can see all the documentation that you'd expect from an API reference. Your constructors, your properties, your methods are all available to you there. And as we've said, we really want to listen to the features that are important to you. Our key goal at the moment is that we want to provide a production-ready release at the end of this year, so that you will then be able to license and deploy your applications. So we're going to be working to get to that point, which will include publication on pub.dev, so that you'll be able to bring in the ArcGIS Maps SDK package via pub.dev. And then that's still going to have sort of limitations in terms of the functionality. But over time, we're then going to build out that functionality so that we can have the same offering as those other SDKs, as has been mentioned in the chat. As part of that, we're really interested to get your input into what features it is that's preventing you from deploying your app. So if there's a particular feature that's really important to you, get in touch, and this will help feed into a way that we prioritize our features. So definitely grab this survey from the video description, and it'll also be on the early adopters portal. And yeah, let us know which features are important to you, and that will really help us with prioritizing rolling out these features. Also on the early adopter portal, we have our user forum, and we've had really great interactions on here. So thanks to everyone who has contributed, and we hope that we've shown that we've been listening to the feedback here with some of the features that are coming either in the beta 2 or in the production release at the end of the year. So I will stop my screen share at this point. And yeah, I think maybe Rex, do you want to kind of just sum up the kind of plan in terms of, moving through that process of a production release, but not fully featured in November, and then, right, into next year?
Sure. No, great. Yeah, great review, great rundown. Thanks, Paul, Jennifer. Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about our plan. Obviously, with our native maps SDKs that we have available today in production, they're extensive, they're deep and rich, and I talked about that before with respect to building around a common core for consistent capabilities and performance. The Flutter SDK is another managed API that we're building on top of that common, rich, and extensive core of functionality. But it does take time to build out that managed API. And so It's important to, and I'll reiterate what Jennifer said, important to join our beta program. We have hundreds of participants in the beta program right now. It's a healthy beta program, getting a lot of feedback, which is great on the current beta, and we look forward to getting feedback on this upcoming beta coming out here shortly. And the key there is, and that survey is going to be critical for us in the near term to figure out what functionality we need to be able to light up in the near term so that you can meet some of the production needs that you have in the near term as we move along this path of completing full capability implementation within our Flutter SDK. So as Jennifer mentioned, later this year, we'll have our first production release of the ArcGIS Maps SDK for Flutter. It'll have limited functionality, just given the time that we've had to be able to wrap functionality that has been required or needed for our developer community to use in production in the near term. A year over the next year, so into 2025, and hopefully by the end of 2025, we'll have completed our effort to deliver all the functionality that we have within our native SDKs for our Flutter developers within the Flutter Maps SDK. So that's our current plan, looking a little bit further into the future. So maybe towards the end of 2025, we should be able to have a production release with complete functionality so it matches our other native Maps SDKs as well. So excited to offer that. Again, what we release and when we release it really hinges on some of the priorities that you provide us with feedback on what capabilities you need in the near term. So please reach out. Please communicate with us, or fill out the survey, or join our beta program. Work in the community. Give us feedback in the community as well, so we can interact with you there too. So exciting opportunities ahead. Looking to make sure that we've got something that we can deliver that provides instant value with our first production release later this year. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rex. Yeah, so key calls to actions, I guess. Sign up for the beta on the early adopter and look out for the second release in a couple of weeks. And then production release at the end of the year. And make sure you fill out our survey. So definitely take those away. Just going to make sure that we've answered any more questions that we've had in. Thanks very much for your questions, those have asked. And also thanks for filling out our survey. It looks like we've no self-proclaimed Flutter experts today, so it's great to see people that have about somewhat 50-50 split, those who've got some experience and those that are new. So that's really great to see, and we hope to hear from you all soon on the forums and through the beta program. So yeah, that's us. Thank you very much for listening and for showing an interest in the ArcGIS Maps SDK for Flutter. Hope to speak to you soon, and yeah, good night, good morning, wherever you are, and have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Take care.